figure out really the crux of what it is that you are offering to the world, right? And I don't mean the thing, right? I don't mean that you're a coach or that you sell, pens or whatever it is, but think of what is the crux of what you sell, right? And make sure it's narrow and interesting enough that anybody will be interested in it.
Are you a solopreneur looking to 2 times your revenue to fund your lifestyle and give back? Well, this podcast is for you. We bring you inspirational guests sharing actionable tips to solve many of the struggles you face each and every day. And now over to your host, Paul Higgins.
Hello to the Build, Live, Give podcast. If you're a first-time listener, welcome. And if you're a regular, thanks for your support. Love to get your feedback at paul@buildlivegive.com. Our guest today is someone who is a former litigation lawyer who has been described by the Toronto Star as a starburst of energy, bright, bubbly, and upbeat. And you'll certainly get all of that on this podcast. Her book, Step Into the Spotlight, has been endorsed by so many New York best-time sellers, authors, and experts that there's too many to mention. She is a singer, television actress, and comedian. Her music, Under the Mediterranean Sky, has made top album lists on all over North America and is played on radio internationally. She's been featured in Forbes and the Entrepreneurial Magazine. She now helps solopreneurs and entrepreneurs to step into the spotlight. It was really hard to handpick 3 key reasons why you should listen to this because there are so many. But anyway, I'll have a go. First, how to strip back all the crap and be you. Second is how to connect with people. And third is how to run an engaged community, even on LinkedIn. Tsufit has kindly also given us a brilliant secret. So go to spotlightsecrets.com and all these links will be in the show notes to get it. So over to Tsufit from Step Into the Spotlight. Welcome to Tsufit from Step Into Your Spotlight to the Build, Live, Give podcast. And you saw a little bit or heard a bit of a pause there because I'd love to know how to actually pronounce your name.
All right then. Well, my name is pronounced Tsufit, kind of like tsunami. But I told Paul to ask me this on the air because every single podcast host and radio show host always asks me just before we go on there, hey, how do you pronounce your name, right? And so I was doing a terrestrial radio show, what people call quote unquote real radio. And the host asked me this question and I said, she was calling me Tsufit. And I said, no, it's Tsufit, feet. So she wrote down feet, right? So she wouldn't forget. And then she goes on the air. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the whatever show it was. And today we have our guest, award-winning author, Tsufit. But so she remembered the feet part, but she got so there you go.
Excellent. And is it, so where are you originally from? Where did the name originally
Well,
from?
I was born in Jerusalem. So Tsufit is a Hebrew name. It means hummingbird or sunbird. But I grew up in Canada. So everybody else in the class was like Debbie, Cindy, and Susan. And there I am, Tsufit. Not easy for a kid, but I embraced it as when I got older, I started doing stuff.
Well, it's probably a lot better than my name, which is Paul. And in Australia, when I went through school, there was about 4 in every class. So, you could have
used it to feed in your class.
Correct. and then I called my son Liam, and it was about 15 years before we actually had him that I picked Liam, and now it's a bit the same. Liam's become the new Paul. So, anyway,
really?
Yeah. So, great having you on. What's something that your family or friends know about you that we wouldn't?
Oh, well, some of my family, not all, know that I started taking salsa and bachata lessons. How's that? I so love it. Yeah. It's actually the new, it's funny because I'm not interested in eating. I'm not interested in watching Netflix. Like it just takes over your life. But yeah, that's my new passion.
Great. And look, I know you started as a litigation lawyer. Then how did you get into comedy and then singing? I'd love to know how that sort of
Okay. So I've actually been on stage, quote unquote stage since I was probably 5, singing with the neighborhood kids. I remember once putting on a show on the back deck of a friend and we gathered an audience, the neighborhood kids, we sang a silly little song. when I was in, grade school, I used to sing. I learned guitar and I play a little bit. And when I was in high school, I used to sing with another girl, and we actually put on this benefit for the Cancer Society, and did a whole big show. So I actually started singing and acting in school plays and stuff like that before I was a lawyer. And then I went to university and I got a law degree. But I had done shows all along kind of on the side, right? So I'd fly out to do a show somewhere, and I'd have my administrative law books backstage, and I'd be studying to be a lawyer. I always kind of wanted to be an actress and a singer. I never really thought of the comedy thing, except that I kept getting comedic roles. Um, but when you're growing up, your parents want you to be, doctor, lawyer, an accountant, or in those days, marry one, one of those things. And I always loved Perry Mason. I still am very much into, right and wrong, and standing up for people. I was in the debate club. So everybody said to my parents, I was in the debate club. They said, Tsufit's going to be a lawyer. And it ended up being true. But one day I kind of woke up. I had had 4 daughters in 4 years. Boom, 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 boom.
Wow.
And I woke up one day with that kind of, that Peggy Lee moment, that song, Is That All There Is? And sort of thought, it's my time. I want to do this. If I'm ever going to do it, seize the day, go, right? So after my fourth daughter was born, I left the law. I kept the kids and decided to follow my dream of being a singer and an actress. And I got on a sitcom. I played a comedically evil cafeteria lady for 4 years on national television. What else? I put out a music CD called Under the Mediterranean Sky. I performed here and there, a little bit of comedy here and there, just because I challenged myself. Like I'd go to an open mic night at a comedy club, but really just with my guitar singing comedic songs. But I thought, I better have a comedic intro, comedic outro. You can't just show up and sing, right? So slowly, I started to pick it up, and that's kind of how it went. Yeah.
Brilliant. And the people that may have supported you during that time, because it sounds like you got great confidence, you're very successful in law. Obviously, to be on national TV is not something that everyone does. Who are the support team as you sort of took this fantastic journey?
Well, okay, it's interesting. You say successful in law. I'm not sure how successful in law. I was successful academically. Like I was Dean's List, at law school, and I did really well in terms of my work as a lawyer. But what I really didn't understand at the time was it's not just enough to be great at what you do. You have to bring in clients as you get more, along the way. And so I started learning about marketing, which actually will lead us into the second half of my career, which we can talk about after.
Yes.
But in terms of success in law, it was more like success at being good at it, but not necessarily, bringing in cases or billing a lot or spending enough hours, because I was always doing shows. Like I'd leave there and go to a rehearsal, or I'd fly out. So my priority wasn't 100% there. It was kind of, I would joke with people that law was my day job. You know how actors have waitress jobs? So I
Yes.
would joke that law was my waitress job. Well, in the legal profession, they don't really like it like that. That's not how they see it. So, and also the confidence thing. It's interesting that you say that, because I didn't quite realize that I was this confident. And I remember once writing in some kind of a journal years later, how you write somehow the 10 things that you want to do going forward. And one was, things like lose weight and start a business and whatever. And on that list with lose weight and start a business, both of which I did, was become more confident. And it's weird looking back at that, because there must have been a period where I wasn't so feeling it. So a funny story, I went to a high school reunion, Paul, and I saw the older sister of a guy that I had a crush on in high school, or maybe it was even lower than high school, maybe elementary school. And I said to her when I saw her, I said, is your brother here? Like, you don't know me, but, we used to, whatever. She goes, oh, I know who you are. She said, when we moved into the neighborhood, you were 8. You walked up to me and stuck out your hand and said, I'm Tsufit. Welcome to the neighborhood. Like, I had no recollection of that. I don't even know if that's true or not. But the fact that she told me that, and she knew that, she knew who I was, I guess maybe you're right that I kind of always had it. So now to your question, you asked me, um, who supported me, who was on my support team.
Yeah.
You know, probably not my parents because um, they couldn't understand. You're a lawyer. You know how many years it takes to become a lawyer, right? You do 4 years of undergrad, you do 3 years of law school, you do a year of articling, you do half a year of bar admission course. Like it's a long haul. It's kind of like being a doctor, right? And then you become a lawyer, you practice for 10 years, and then, I'm done with that. So not so much them. They couldn't figure it out. Other people in my life also, not so much. But my biggest supporters, probably my daughters. My 4 kids who
Mm.
were very young. Remember, there was a national TV documentary about people that left for second careers, and there was an episode about me, and they interviewed the daughters, and they kind of asked them questions, and they were really proud, because it kind of showed them that they don't have to follow a traditional path, that they can follow their dreams. And in fact, now one of my daughters kind of does what I do. She's an entrepreneur. Even though, it's funny, every once in a while I'll say to her, "Are you sure you don't want to get a job like your sisters?" And she'll say, "Mom, like, look what you did. Like, why?" But I understand why parents are like, I understand now why my parents did that, right? Because you think that a job is secure, but really nowadays, not so much.
No, and if you think of all those hours that are needed in law, I don't know how much it's changed, but
A
certainly when I
lot,
work
a
with
lot, a
lawyers,
lot.
yeah. But
They put showers in some of the law. I mean, that's how
really,
many hours. Yeah.
and
A
but
shower. If you need a shower, that's not a job you want to have.
no, definitely not. And but spending more time with your four daughters, did the pivot and the change that you made, even though it mightn't have been, the best decision that your parents thought you made from a family unit perspective, was that? I suppose I'm asking an obvious question here, but it seems like that was a great change for you.
Well, you know what? There are pluses and minuses, right? I would have probably had more income, at least initially, or more for sure more consistent income. I mean, there were years
Mm.
that I earned more as a coach. There were years that probably it would have been better to have a paycheck, right? Especially 4 young daughters. I mean, that's a lot. And then they all went to university, and I mean, there's a lot of obligation. A house we bought at the peak of the market, where interest rates were insane. So it would have been nice to have the regularity and the security of having a regular paycheck. On the other hand, when I was having the babies, I was basically have a baby, leave a baby at home with a nanny, schlep all the way down to work because we live kind of a little bit north and a little bit of a suburb. Schlep downtown, um, pregnant, go home, drop the second baby, schlep downtown, go home, drop the third baby, right? And by the time I had four of them lying around, I'm thinking, and we had a nanny that kind of left us abruptly, and so we talked about it. We said, well, you maybe you want to stay home and do something else. So, and at the beginning, I thought maybe I would get a law job closer to home, and I kind of tried a little bit, but it didn't really happen. And then, I thought I. I've always dreamed about this idea. I've always loved, those movies that you watch about somebody who starts a business or somebody who writes a book or somebody puts out an album, all three, of those things that I eventually did. But I used to find those movies super exciting. And so I just started kind of working on it myself. And, going from the music thing, which wasn't really sustainable long term. I mean, you can't earn enough to support four kids from
Mm.
at least not in Canada. I mean, and it's pretty, Jan Arden is kind of a big name in Canada, and she used to say Canada's the only country where you can headline at Maple Leaf Gardens and still have to take the subway home. It's kind of like Madison Square Garden.
Yeah.
It's like we don't really have celebs in Canada, and if we do, I mean, we do a bit now, but if we do, there are people who got famous in the U.S. and then came back. Um, like Bare Naked Ladies or Drake or people like that, but or some comedians went to Hollywood, but it's not so much from being here. So yeah, it did kind of make a better lifestyle in some ways. I mean, we didn't have a ton of money all the time consistently, but I could take kids, like I would go to conferences, first music conferences, then business sometimes, and sometimes I would take a kid with me. And in fact, the daughter who's an entrepreneur now, I was going to a marketing conference in Chicago, and she was a teenager. I had already booked my ticket. I had already booked the flight. And she and I used to have discussions about marketing. I would just tell her what I was working on. She was really the only kid who used to really, really, get interested in it with me. And after I booked my flight, I said to her, "Hey, you want to come with me?" And she said, "Sure." So I changed my flight, added a few days so we could explore Chicago. And she now publicly says to her clients and to her Facebook group and to her following, her fans, that that was kind of a pivotal moment for her. that I took her to this marketing conference. She said she used to listen at my door when I was, either doing interviews with people like you, or making sales. I don't call them sales calls, but having discussions with potential clients and making sales, and that helped her learn. So that would never have happened. And I could go to the kids, you know, graduation during the day, or I could go help out in their classroom, or I could take off and go to the movies in the middle. So it really gave me a freedom, which to me is kind of a higher value than money.
Oh, spot on. Couldn't agree more. Now, the next section is the build section. So what I'd love you to do.
We've got sections. Who knew?
Yeah, who knew? We've got 3 sections.
Sections. How organized of you.
I know. My book is called Build, Live, Give. My podcast is called Build, Live, Give. So the sections,
nice.
funny enough, are called Build, Live, Give.
So have we done one of them? Did we do
We've
live?
done one. So we've ticked.
Okay.
Actually, we've ticked just the start. Right?
Okay.
So we've got a little bit of work to do now.
All right. I'm here.
But so, the classic, when people ask you, hey, Tsufit or Tsufit. No, Tsufit. That's right.
What do you hilarious, do? Paul. It's been done. Yeah.
Yeah, probably 1,000 times. What do you say? What do you do these days?
What do I do?
Yeah.
I have a full 4-week course on how to answer that question, which I will not plug right now. But the fact that it can take me 4 weeks to teach somebody how to say it in 30 seconds shows you how important the answer to that question is. But if you're talking in front of a group. But if somebody just asked me one-on-one, what do I do? I would say something like I coach experts to get noticed, or I coach entrepreneurs to get noticed, something like that.
Great. And, we talked about confidence before, and a lot of people, come out of a job, corporate like you, a lawyer for me, work for Coca-Cola as an executive, and you've got huge confidence within the area that you're used to. But then you step into this thing called entrepreneur or solopreneurship, where all of a sudden you don't have all the skills. And I know certainly for me, my confidence, took a big dive. Do you see that? And how do you help people build that confidence back to, step out into the spotlight?
Well, it's interesting that you should mention corporate because it's been my personal observation over, 18 years of coaching entrepreneurs and new entrepreneurs that corporate tends to kind of beat the life out of them. It kind of tends to beat the spark out of them. It kind of squishes people. So it's not exactly as you say. It's almost the opposite. That they had the confidence initially. They had how they say about kids that. Especially they say, I've seen it said about girls, right? That girls when they're young are really good at math and they're really good at, all these things. And then slowly they kind of learn that they're not supposed to be good at those things. And whatever it is, they conform, they become less good. And I find this sometimes people go into corporate and it's kind of like a machine, and they go into that machine and they're given a very limited role, and they're supposed to do that thing that they're supposed to do. And I find that sometimes takes the life out of them. So then your question is a valid one, which is, how do you get it back, right? Like, how do you get it? And it's really going back to the way that you naturally are. It's almost like going back to being a kid. And sometimes like in business, if you're, I normally get asked to speak to, like when I speak or on a podcast or in a telesummit or whatever it is. Normally my audience are entrepreneurs, but once in a while I'll get asked to speak to a corporate audience, and they'll ask me about stuff to do. And the kind of advice that I would normally give entrepreneurs, I say to them, well, the truth is, if you follow my advice, one of two things will happen. You'll either get the corner office or you'll get fired, right? Because you're either going to like not fit in a good way, or you're going to not fit in a you don't fit in, get out of here kind of way, right? Because it's taking a risk. And that's what entrepreneurship is. That's how you build. That's how you take. You have to embrace the standing out part. You have to embrace. So, for example, when I first started as an entrepreneur, so I left law. I knew how I was supposed to dress as a lawyer, even though I didn't always. But I even had bosses tell me, Tsufit, put your hair in a bun, which I didn't. Tsufit, wear a suit, which I often didn't. And when I got into, becoming a coach and entrepreneur, I would go to the local chamber of commerce, the local board of trade, and they'd go, and you know how they give everybody 30 seconds to introduce themselves, 30 seconds at the microphone. And for the first 6 months, Paul, of me going to these events, I had a lot of really helpful people, helpful in quotes, coming up to me saying, Tsufit, you're doing it wrong. First of all, you should dress like this. And secondly, you should sound like that, right? So I would go to these meetings wearing something, like ethnically interesting, like maybe a Chinese jacket or just something bright and colorful and unique, right? So that I would stand out. They're all wearing suits. I would say something funny or dramatic or whatever, something that would get their attention, right? So 6 months of people telling me, Tsufit, you're doing it wrong. Guess what happened after 6 months? They put me on stage to teach them how to do it wrong too.
Right.
So the answer to your question is you have to kind of go back to being the real you. I'll give you another little story. Elvis Presley, okay? Everybody in the world, even where you are, knows who Elvis Presley is, right? Even way out where you are. So when he first started out singing and hanging around at Sun Records and wherever it was, somewhere, was it Memphis, Tennessee, or somewhere around there, he would try to sound like the singers of his time, right? He did. He would go in there and he would try to audition for Sam Phillips and whatever and try to sound like Bing Crosby or whoever was popular at that time. And it just wasn't working. And the guy would send him away, send him away, send him away. And one day between these sessions, he was just fooling around for fun. And I think he was singing, that's all right, mama, that's all right, in kind of this way that Sam Phillips had never heard before. And he started recording it and said, that's it, right? So even for Elvis, it took him a while to find his authentic voice, to get back to his authentic voice. So if you corporate escapees, you corporate refugees are having trouble, take heart. Even Elvis had a little bit of trouble, but eventually he found it, and you will too.
Yeah, and look, I'm sure a lot of people listening right now are saying that's brilliant advice. I completely get it, but what's the first step? Be my natural self. Like that's great, but what could I do tomorrow to start that?
Well, okay, speak the way you would speak to your friend at 10 o'clock on the phone instead of the way you would speak at a meeting at 4 o'clock in the afternoon at work, right? Like it starts with how we speak, how we dress, how we, it starts with, because I think a lot of corporate escapees have something that I call professionalitis, right? They left corporate in order to become entrepreneurs because they want more freedom, they want more autonomy, they want to follow that dream, they want to do what they want to do, they want to think big, right? And then what do? They do the only thing they know how to do. They mimic corporate. They get an office, they get a secretary or a VA or an assistant or whatever they're called. They, they get the business cards, they get the brochure, they put an ad in the, not anymore, but they used to put in the yellow pages, now maybe on Facebook, whatever it is. Like they do all the things that they did in corporate, and then they wonder why it's not working, and they wonder why it's not different, right? Entrepreneurship works completely differently. So what can they do tomorrow? Figure out really the crux of what it is that you are offering to the world, right? And I don't mean the thing, right? I don't mean that you're a coach or that you sell, pens or whatever it is, but think of what is the crux of what you sell, right? And make sure it's narrow and interesting enough that anybody will be interested in it. So for example, let's say you wanted to copy Fred, whatever his name is, who started FedEx, right? And start some kind of a courier service, right? Well, there's an entrepreneur out there, I don't remember her name, who started a package delivering service, get this, where she delivers care packages to prisoners, right, from their loved ones. Now, this is not a huge market, right? But it's a market that, if you were in that situation, you'd hear about her. Her name would get passed around, right? And she doesn't have to sound like FedEx or UPS or any of those. She doesn't have to mimic them. She doesn't have to be quote unquote professional. She just has to be known as the one who does that thing. So you asked me, what can they do tomorrow, right? What's a shortcut to this? Well, I already said part of it is speak how you naturally speak to your best friend or, to the guys at the bar, dress how you naturally dress. But in terms of your business itself, your business should also be authentic and natural and really serve a narrow, authentic need in the marketplace, one that not everybody serves. So again, and I I don't know why I have prisoners on the mind, but there's let's switch from prisoners to priests. Okay, here's another
Yes.
unique situation. There's a therapist out there somewhere, or I don't know if he's a counselor, a coach, a therapist, but some guy, his job is to counsel priests who fall in love, because priests don't get married, right? They're supposed to be celibate.
Yeah, it depends on the faith, but yeah.
Well, yeah, okay. Well, I'm Jewish. What do I know from priests? But but anyway, that's what they do, right? So it's a narrow niche. It's a narrow niche. And so it also helps you be yourself. I have a client, she was in one of my programs, who is a therapist, and she was a therapist to spouses, but primarily women, who found out that their spouses were gay, because that happened to her after 25 years of marriage, to grown children. And one day, guess what, honey, I'm gay, right? So she made that her profession. She got to be authentic. She got to be herself. She didn't have to follow the mold of, she wrote a book about, she didn't have to follow the mold. That's another way into this.
Yeah, and your advice, do you rip the Band-Aid? Like, do you just do it overnight, or do you gradually make a change?
Oh, in terms of like leaving corporate to get
No,
become an
as in
entrepreneur?
far as being, for me, for example, like you said, Coke, had a very specific professional US, way of doing things, and it took me a long time to get to who I really am.
What did you do at Coke?
So I was a executive. So I ran a $700 million business unit.
That's it? 700 million? Huh.
Well,
pretty impressive. Pretty impressive. Okay.
Well, yeah.
And some of my best marketing lessons are actually from Coke. I talk about Coca-Cola all the time, from the new Coke and classic Coke thing. Tell me you weren't behind that one.
No.
There's a lot of interesting stories from Coke. So you're saying you left this executive position, and what was your path?
Yeah, so my path was into coaching. So executive coaching was the first step. But I still wrote like all my emails, and as I targeted more smaller businesses, as I realized that corporate.
You probably wrote them formally, right? Like
correct.
Right.
So
yeah.
Even my videos, everything, it was like I was
formal. Yeah. Okay.
Formal.
For 18 years, Paul, I've had to kick the formal out of my clients, because very often that is the case. And in fact, I even face this myself. Okay, so you mentioned my book. It's called Step into the Spotlight, A Guide to Getting Noticed. So in my book, I first started chapter 5, was going to be a different book. It was going to be called How to Be Your Own Publicist. And it was a whole long book by itself. I wrote the whole book, and then I realized this is a boring book. This is a book that anybody could have written. It was a boring how-to book about how to get publicity. And one day, to add insult to injury, Paul, get this, I'm ready to go ahead with it. I walk into, the big chain bookstore, and what do I see? Exactly the book that I was going to write, with exactly the title I was going to use, How to Be Your Own Publicist. Boring title.
Yes.
And the book was boring. So guess what? So I did not allow myself to publish that book, and I forced myself to go back to the drawing board, because that was the corporate lawyerish me who wrote that book in a corporate lawyerish voice, the same voice that used to write facta, I guess is the real word, for lawyers going to court. Okay. So I said to myself, no, I got to write in this comedian Tsufit voice, not the lawyer Tsufit voice. Like, what people want from me is the brain of the lawyer with the voice of the comedian. And that's the combination that ended up working for me. So I wrote this book, Step into the Spotlight, but guess what? I took that last book and condensed it, got rid of a lot of it, and made it chapter 5. But then I had a problem, Paul. The problem was chapters 1 to 4, chapters 6 and 7 were written in the Tsufit voice that you're hearing today, the comedian voice, the comfortable in my own skin voice, right? Chapter 5 was still written in that corporate, methodical, logic, whatever side of the brain that is, left, I think, voice, right? So I had to hire like a couple of editors to help me. And in the end, I got it so it kind of fits. But how do you do that? So shorter is better,
right,
in emails. So if you want, formality, like, when I'm writing, and some people complain about this, but, sometimes if I'm posting on social media and somebody asks me a question, you know what my answer is? Dunno, D-U-N-N-O, right? Like, I don't know, dunno, or I'm gonna, G-O-N-N-A. Now, that's not professional, and some people that irks them. And to tell you the absolute truth, I'm pretty pedantic when it comes to language. And if somebody says the reason why, I'll correct them and say, no, it's the reason that. or if somebody uses they instead of he, which I think is now accepted by dictionaries, but they're talking about singular instead of plural, I'll correct them. Like, I'm that kind of pedantic, and still, so even though I understand language, I understand grammar, I know that that's not what resonates with people. I know that's not how you communicate to that part of the brain. I don't know, some people call it the alligator brain, right? But the 5-year-old part of us that really, I think, makes most of the decisions. I mean, look at the US. I don't want to get political because there's a lot going on there even today as we speak. But the current president, the current occupant of that office, has, his language has been analyzed to be like what, grade 8 level, 14-year-old level, or whatever. And it resonates with people. I mean, whether you love him or you hate him, there was some research done when he was still just one of 17 Republican candidates before he even got the nomination for the Republican Party 4 years ago. It was analyzed that when you hear him speak, whether you love him or you hate him, a certain part of your brain flickered that didn't flicker with the other candidates, whether you like them or not. There's something about the way that man speaks. He understands more. I mean, maybe he doesn't have a choice, but that's not the point here. The point is he speaks the way people hear things, right? So, you have the other party that's all, civilized, and they're very methodical, they're very lawyer-like, they're very articulate, they're very nuanced. I mean, the previous occupant of that office was very nuanced in his delivery, which also resonated with his audience. But I think the voice that the current occupant has resonates even more. And that's the voice that I would encourage entrepreneurs to use, because entrepreneurship is kind of a roll up your sleeves kind of thing. And depending who, and I have clients who are accountants or lawyers, or in occupations where they say to me, Tsufit, you don't understand my business. You don't understand. My clients are CEOs, my clients are executives, my clients are high net worth people or whatever. It doesn't matter who they are. That's how people hear stuff. I use the word stuff a lot because that's the way people hear stuff. That's the way people understand stuff, right? That, a higher level of language is great for courtrooms. It's not great for marketing. It's not great for entrepreneurs. So yes, you have to re-educate yourself. So if you write a memo, you need to send it to somebody. And I have clients who do that with me, right? Financial advisors, whatever. They'll send me something, or we'll do it in our coaching session normally. Even my daughter does it occasionally. They'll send me something and say, I know I'm being too verbose. I know I'm saying too many words, like, help me cut this. And, sometimes writing a few words, like in my Spotlight Secret series, which Paul, you'll mention later, I have to force myself sometimes to cut and cut and cut and cut. And sometimes you'll see the sentences could be 3-4 words long, and then I'll go to the next sentence. I don't worry about punctuation. I don't worry about grammar. I don't worry about anything, but my focus is about communication, not about following some arbitrary rules, which may work in a corporate circumstance. They may work for lawyers. They may work for your grade 7 teacher in English class. They definitely do not work when it comes to communicating. Robert Kiyosaki, who wrote Rich Dad, Poor Dad, sent his first book to an editor who happened also to be a grade 1 English teacher, I think. And she said it was, really bad, and tried to fix it, and totally took his voice out of it. He took the book back. He put his voice back in. He released it, best-selling book. And he said, you know what? I'm not a best writing author. I'm a best-selling author, right?
Love
so
it.
There you
Love
go.
it. Now, one more question before I do quickly fall back into my corporate structure of 3 sections is LinkedIn groups. I know you run a fantastic LinkedIn group. A lot of people say, oh, LinkedIn groups, are dead. They're only full of spam. There's no connection, etc. I'm sure that you've got a different opinion to that, and I'd love for you to tell our listeners why your group is so successful.
Okay, well, first of all, sadly, I don't have a different opinion than that, Paul, because what you said is pretty much true nowadays amongst most LinkedIn groups. I'm not saying that to disparage anyone. I have leaders. My group, it's called Step Into the Spotlight. What a coincidence.
Yeah.
Is full of leaders of other LinkedIn groups. So I have people in there with groups of, 76,000, 150,000, 300,000 members. And I have them privately, some of them coming to me and saying, Tsufit, what you asked me, what's your secret? How come my group is completely inactive? How can I get it active again? And like, what the heck's going on? And what happened was, it's a combination of things. One, LinkedIn does not have the notification system anymore. It used to be better that, for example, Facebook has. So on Facebook, somebody posts something, people get notified right away, and it's easier to have a conversation there. Your audience may not be there. My audience is on LinkedIn primarily, which is why I'm there. But the notification system, the technology works better there, at least now. LinkedIn seems to keep taking stuff away. I don't know why. Some people thought they were trying to kill groups altogether. But so what our secret is, and I tell it to anybody who asks me. In fact, I've had people interview me for the whole hour just about LinkedIn. And in fact, LinkedIn has approached me. LinkedIn themselves has interviewed me many times, asking me exactly the question you asked me. So what we do in our group is we don't allow any articles. Most groups are full of one-way broadcasts, articles. We don't allow any teaching posts, 5 ways to, turn your dog into a cat by Friday. We don't allow that in our group. No promo, no video, no rants, no, inspirational quotes, none of the quote unquote content that you see in these groups that are really one-way broadcasts. I go into a group of 200-300 people, I post something, I go back 2 weeks later and nobody's commented, right? In my group, if I post something, sometimes the next day there's 85 comments, 100. I mean, not every day, but it happens, despite the fact that most people don't get notifications about the comments. In fact, I don't get notifications of comments in my own group. So I have to actually physically go back through and scroll. So we're handicapped in that way, and still it worked. We're challenged in that way. So why does it work? It works because we really are a community. I invited a big mouths to join. So I invited people who are opinionated, which means it gets a little contentious once in a while. I encourage people to comment if they try to show us how brilliant they are by posting a teaching post. We delete it and then tell them, you know what, you want to show you're brilliant? Show you're brilliant by answering other people's questions, which, you're perfectly welcome to do, instead of posting, a question which is just to show how smart you are. And the reason for that is not because we have anything against people marketing. The whole group is about marketing. I want you to get clients from our group. I want you to get podcast interviews from our group. I want you to get media attention from our group. All of those things do happen for members and for me. But if you do it blatantly, it just doesn't work. It's not like, some people think that there's this ethical thing against marketing. I have nothing ethically against marketing. I mean, full disclosure, I started this group so that it would help me attract clients in media and speaking and podcasts and all that stuff, right? And for my members as well. So I'm perfectly transparent about that, but it doesn't work if you're just, talking at people instead of with them. It just doesn't work. So that's kind of our secret. And hopefully at the end, you'll give people the URL so they can apply to join. The other thing is that we don't accept everybody who applies, just because we want the quality of the conversation to really be there. So if we think that somebody really, based on their profile, isn't kind of the makeup of who we have in the group. It's a group of authors, speakers, coaches, experts, influencers, media. If the person, business professionals, if the person doesn't fall in those categories, then we'll have to see another reason that you should be there. If you do want to join, if you send me a personal note and mention that you heard me on Paul's podcast, it will increase your chances of being accepted.
Excellent. Well, actually, before we go into the next section, I will talk about my book. And I was a bit like you. I actually wrote the book in 2 halves. One was pre-transplant, one was post. And it was interesting. So I still have the corporateness in it that I've tried to knock out, but it was definitely written twice. So then I had to combine it.
Yeah, I hear you.
So yeah, it's a bit of a pain, but it gives you all the lessons that I learned in Coca-Cola. How I grew a 6-figure business whilst having a transplant, which I wouldn't recommend, but I can show you how to do it without the transplant, and also give you the exact 5 steps.
Oh, when you said transplant, you meant like,
kidney transplant.
Oh my goodness, I thought you meant transplant from business to.
No.
Oh my God, he's talking. Okay, folks.
I've had 2 transplants.
Oh my goodness. Okay, I'm sure your audience knows, but mine doesn't. So he's talking real transplant. He's not talking Coca-Cola to entrepreneurship.
No,
wow.
Correct. That was the easy transplant. The next one was a bit harder. But anyway, it shows you exactly how to, do what I did, which was, and exactly what Tsufit has done is leave not the boringness, well, let's say the boringness of corporate or litigation into a wonderful world of entrepreneurship. Tsufit.
Yeah, it wasn't really boring. It wasn't really boring.
Come on.
I love litigation. What was boring was kind of litigation is fascinating. It's people suing people and arguing about stuff. But what the boring part of it is the culture around it. right? The way they want you to comport yourself. That part is boring.
Boring. All right. Well, so anyway, you can go to buildlivegive.com and download a free chapter today. And also I'll have the links to that, but everything else that Tsufit has said so far and what she says from now on in the show notes as well. So the next section, and we'll sort of rapidly go through these, is what are some daily habits that help you be successful and happy?
Well, I think this is not something I would have said earlier, but recently I think being physically active
Mm-hmm.
really, really helps. And when the weather's decent I live in Canada, so that's like for 10 minutes a year. But when the weather's decent around here, like basically from April to November, I walk every day in the morning, like I try first thing, right? And I was trying to do it beyond that, but it gets really slippery, and so I've kind of picked up the slack with the dancing. But being physically active, because for many years I sat at my desk and I didn't move. And especially during the year that I was writing the book, my daughters would bring me food to like I wouldn't even leave the desk to go get food. So if they didn't bring me food, I just didn't eat. And it still happens sometimes that I have breakfast at 6 p.m., which, yeah, I know you're in Australia, so that's probably the next day for you. But
It is breakfast.
yeah. So being physically active is one habit. People will tell you, and I think it's very right, that you shouldn't check your email first thing in the morning, and now there's 95,000 other kinds of notification, LinkedIn, Facebook, all the other stuff. People will tell you that. And if I really, 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 really have to get something done, like I have 3 programs that I've created, 2 10-week programs and a 4-week program. When I was working on those, or when I was working on the book or something that was tangible, I really had to get it done, I would try to obey that, because otherwise I would get mired in all this email stuff. And, every day there's people asking me to be on podcasts. Every day there's people asking for stuff back. They want me to send them stuff. They want me to respond to them or whatever. And by the time I get around to writing the book or creating the program in the afternoon, I don't have the energy for that. I mean, it's not that I don't have energy, but I don't have the kind of focus that I might have in the morning. So it is good advice, but I don't generally take that advice. When I have a project, yes, I do. Like if I have a specific goal for that day, I do. But nowadays, if I don't have a specific goal, I'll get up in the morning and start engaging in my Step into the Spotlight group or in other people's groups, because that helps me find cool people to invite to join our community. And then I just start responding to people. And, like Paul's invitation came yesterday, and I like to get on, like, people say, let's do it in 6 months from now. Let's do it next February. And I say, well, how about let's do it right now? Like if you weren't in Australia, we would have done this yesterday. And I've had some of the best interviews that I've ever done have been, 5 minutes after I get asked to do it. If I'm not with a client, I'd rather just do it, because you get that electric energy and the spontaneity. And for me, I prefer not to prepare for these. A lot of podcasters will give you questions ahead of time, not mentioning any names. And I may or may not
Boring first names.
have looked. Can I disclose? So Paul asked me at the beginning of this, did you have a chance to look at the questions? And I said to Paul off the air, can I tell him? Yes, I said, yeah, I had a chance to purposely ignore your questions because I wanted this to be spontaneous. I wanted, because I am such a perfectionist, and I am such a lawyery kind of person, that if I had the questions ahead of time, I would have needed a few hours to prepare the answers. Right. And I would have wanted them to be prepared, and they had to be right. And then I had to refer to my notes. And I've done this whole thing, no notes, no preparation. Like if I don't know this by now, then I don't know this, and you have no business interviewing me, because I'm not expert enough for you to interview. Right. That's how I figure.
Brilliant. Well, the next section is the give section. So what's a community or a charity or a cause that you support, and why?
There's a couple of them, and it's funny, I've never actually shared this with anybody before, because nobody's asked me. And I don't really like to publicly share this stuff, because I kind of feel like this kind of giving is a private choice. But at the moment, and it changes, right? And occasionally clients will ask me or whatever to support their causes. But right now, there are 2 things that are very dear to me. One is to do with children. So one charity, which, I'm not going to name, but one has to do with children, because having had children, like they got to have what they got to have, right?
Yeah.
And the other one that really tugs at my heartstrings is old people, like elderly people. There's an organization that is a collaboration between two different faiths that supports old people who've been through the most horrific incident of the 20th century or of our time, and are now poor on top of it, right? Like they don't have money for food. So it sends them a box with kind of staples that they can make. Like every month they get this box of like flour and like things that they can make, not just like prepared stuff, but so those are a few things, and then just whatever comes up, right? But again, I kind of feel weird about sharing that because I to me that's a really, I know a lot of people talk about what they do, but and obviously on top of that, not money. I mean, I share my expertise and what I know every single day with people, whether they can afford to be my clients or not. Yeah.
All right, great. Well, I think I might be asking for the impossible here, but I'll give it a go. Rapid fire. So I'll ask you 3 questions and get rapid fire responses. So the first one is 3 top personal effectiveness tips.
I write notes all the time. Like even while we were talking today, I have a page of notes. I find it solidifies, in terms of taking stuff in and in terms of, clarifying my thoughts. So when I was writing a law school exam, everybody else was 20 minutes into it and I was scribbling notes in the margin and I ended up, getting an A in that class. So that's one of them. Top effectiveness tips. Also do it now. Do it now, right? Instead of making a note to do it later, which sometimes unfortunately I have to do.
Yep. And number 3?
Do it now and be direct with people. Like I don't like to go through personal assistants and VAs. I know people have them, but I like to pick up the even email. Like I'll say, send me your number. If a client approaches me, I'll say, send me your phone number. Like I won't enter into email exchanges with most prospects.
Great. And what's a bit of technology that's essential for running your biz?
There's something called RoboForm, which keeps passwords, which I don't know how I'd keep like 200 passwords in my head. That's essential. Recently, my daughter pressed upon me a Smarty Pants phone, which I don't use as a phone, but I take it everywhere with me, and it's like this mini computer. It's basically a smartphone, right? But I don't use it as a phone, and so now I'm in touch with everybody at all times, except when I don't want to be, which actually going back to the effectiveness tip.
Yeah.
Don't be available when you don't want to be available. That's my best effectiveness tip.
Yeah, that's why I always tell people voicemail is designed for or made for a purpose. Use it.
Right.
So, and the last one is, what is your best source of ideas?
Other people. I mean, I read more than anybody I know. I inhale books. I own more books than, some local libraries. I've given away thousands of them and I still have, zillions of them. I listen to podcasts. Although, time is limited, but I read, I listen, I engage, I learn every single day from everybody. And I learn from watching the commercials. If nobody watches TV anymore, but even online, when other people leave the room because there's a commercial, that's when I tune in because I learn from commercials.
Yeah, I'm the same. It's my old Coke habits. I can't stop that. All right. So the last question I've left is the biggest of all.
You've said that 5 times already. That's the last question.
No.
Okay, go.
Section. But this is the last one.
Go.
Absolutely last one. And what is the impact that you want to leave on the world?
It's funny. I don't really think about that. But I just want people to be kind to each other. I want to be kind to people. There's too much crap going on in the world. It's scary and too much, people struggling with each other. I actually, felt a bit nauseous yesterday watching the televised whatever was on what's going on in the US right now. And so the impact I want to leave on the world, I just want people to follow that dream and dance, enjoy life, embrace joy. And so in any way, if I can make somebody smile or make their eyes light up or help them see how they can do that for someone else, it's my pleasure to do that.
Well, you've definitely made me smile today, and I'm sure everyone else listening as well. So you can find out more about Tsufit it's tsufit.com. And she's also got a great giveaway at Spotlight Secrets bubbly.com. I'll have that. I'll have the link to her book, which is spotlightbook.com. We'll have all of those in the show notes.
And the group as well, if you want to join.
And the LinkedIn group link, we'll have it all there. But look, thoroughly entertaining, and I've got to say very educational and perfect for our times, because I don't know about Toronto. They always say Toronto and Melbourne are, very similar. So I don't know about the people in the city. But, I think over here in Australia, we've just become way too politically correct, and everyone's worried about what everyone else is saying.
Yeah.
And it's like, what you're saying is a breath of fresh air. Just go back to who you are. And if the world doesn't accept you, well, that's their problem, not yours. So
and you're not doing it right. You're not doing it right unless somebody doesn't like it, because you got to, no, seriously, you got to make a choice, right?
Yeah, correct. Yeah. All right. Brilliant having you on, Tsufit, and have a great night over there.
Right back at you.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.
What an absolute blast that was. Such a character, and I learned so much from that. And the great thing is she made my job super easy. So you can get all the show notes, because there's lots of links in there at buildlivegive.com. If you believe someone you know would benefit from this show, and I'm sure many would, please share. Tsufit would love to get your engagement and feedback on LinkedIn. Her profile will be in the show notes. You can get the Build, Live, Give book at buildlivegive.com/book. If you've read it and liked it or loved it, please leave me a review. That would be fantastic. All these links will be in the show notes. Please take action to build new revenue streams to fund your lifestyle and give back.
Thank you for listening to the Build, Live, Give podcast. If you like what you heard, please subscribe and leave us a review. It would mean the world to us.